Today we're going to talk about understanding and healing social anxiety. And this can be anywhere from feeling super shy in groups and not being able to communicate or speak, or kind of feeling like you just don't even want to be there, which is that there's a time to honor that, right? But sometimes it's also important to be social. All the way to the effects of post-traumatic stress, right? Where we've really experienced great harm to ourselves. And it's truly frightening to be out in public, right? And these two, and there's a million versions in between there, right? If you imagine that as a human, it feels like we should be comfortable all the time, right? Like we should be able to walk around in our quiet center, experiencing the world, feeling content and safe. And if something comes up, we can express ourselves. Like this feels like a natural balance of how the human being is designed. And yet it's not really all of our experience. So, and part of it comes from within and part of it comes from without. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So the first thing I want us to imagine we're sitting at home and we're just being ourselves. We're however we are when we woke up in the morning. Maybe we're a little agitated, maybe we're calm, maybe we're confused, maybe we're feeling dull, who knows how we're feeling. And then for whatever reason, we have to go out in public, right? We have to go to the grocery store or something. And it was funny, I went to the grocery store, I don't know, a few weeks ago with a friend, and we walked in, and we all live in the world right now, so we know there's lots of wild energies flying around. And so we walk along, and I'm going through to the produce aisle, and all of a sudden, my heart was pounding, like it was just like pounding right out of my chest. And I'm standing there thinking, what is going on? Like pounding like I was running away from something. And at first it kind of took me off my game. Like I was like, whoa, like what's going on? And there was this part of me that was like, God, I got to get out of here. I don't want to be here anymore. And then I just sort of took a deep breath and I thought to myself, wait a minute. How did you feel when you walked in? I was fine. I was fine before I walked into this grocery store. This isn't mine. I don't know whose it is, but it's not mine. And so I just continued walking through the store, kind of aware that my heart was going to be pounding and my nerves were going to be a little on edge. But I just kind of kept walking through the store, just breathing deeply and trying to remember now what I was in there for. I got it going. And I got to the end of the store and I checked out and I was waiting at the front for my friend to finish checking out. And she walks up to me, and this is my intuitive friend that I talk about a lot. And she walks up to me and she says, do you feel that? And I'm like, yeah. Oh my God. Like, she's like, what's going on in here today? I'm like, I have no idea. And the two of us just kind of, looked at each other and kind of compared body notes. We were both like, wow. And she felt it differently. Like she kind of feels it like hair standing up on end, all over her, and just sort of like she's in a whirlwind. And I felt it in my heart, just this pounding, almost bringing myself to a sweat, And we got in the car and we both kind of just exhaled and went, whew, that was crazy. And then we just went on with our day. This is one response to the world. And so the first thing I want to talk about is the difference between an empathic response to what's going on in the outside world, and that inner wiring that happens because of trauma, right? So that we are going to talk about that. But these are different things, right? Just to touch on that for a moment. If I've had, and trauma, sometimes we think of trauma as only being extreme, rape or physical abuse. But trauma is anything that for some reason stops your breath. Actually, we're going to talk about this first. We often talk about, in yoga, we talk about the different bodies. We have the physical body, the pranic body, which we normally associate with breath. It's more than that, but for now it's important just to think of it as breath. We think of our mental bodies, our emotional bodies, our radiant bodies, our auric bodies. Like these are all aspects of who we are, right? Our pranic body is very important in understanding trauma response, right? And this is, again, anything in our life that for some reason has made us stop breathing, right? Anything. It could be even being around people who yell a lot, even especially as children, right? As soon as someone starts yelling, what do? Right? We kind of just close our eyes and we just sort of freeze in our body and we stop breathing, right? It's also, they talk about the fight or flight response, but there's also the freeze and hide response or something. I can't remember what the other part of it is, but you can imagine, right? So you kind of go, right? If you're big and strong and male, like they often talk about the fight or flight response as being our masculine, not just male, but our masculine response. But the feminine response is often to freeze and hide. I think that's what it is. Because if you imagine, a female animal often has children. Well, you can't fight or flight or fly, right? When you have children. So what do? You make everyone quiet, you freeze, and you hide until the danger passes. In a lot of ways, this is also our childlike response because we cannot escape. We have no choice. There's nothing to be done. There is no such thing as leaving, and there's no such thing as fighting. So you freeze. This is the response that is stored in our pranic body, right? It's every time we've ever frozen. And this can be anything. Especially if we had a difficult childhood, which means anything beyond a completely safe and supportive environment. Like being a parent is difficult, and it's especially difficult if you're already struggling. Maybe you already have issues with anxiety. Maybe you already have issues with depression or schizophrenia or bipolar disorder or abuse. There's a lot of chance that a lot of us here, and certainly in the world, were raised in situations, and again, not demonizing our parents, that's not the point, but it's about simply honoring the environment that we grew up in. I don't understand why. I don't know what the big picture of each of our karmic paths are, but for some reason, this was our upbringing, right? So there may have been many, many instances as a child where you stopped breathing, right? And then and we do this thing. And so what's happening every time we breathe? They say in brain, like neurobiology and the connection of the mind and experience and the breath, what fires together wires together. So what happens, right? Something scary is out there. Parents, friends, bullies, partners, relationships, narcissists, whatever you want to, whatever it is out there that we don't know how to deal with, right? We stop breathing. What else is going on? We're frightened or angry, right? What else is going on? We're storing a memory of what's happening in our brain. So we have a story, an emotion, and and we're not breathing, all wiring together. So now imagine your pranic body is like a record, like a vinyl record from the olden days, right? So imagine your breath, your normal breath pattern, right? We inhale, we hit this beautiful change point, we exhale, we hit our beautiful change point, right? We have this beautiful circle of a breath. Well, this is from birth, right? We've had this circle. Now all of a sudden someone starts to yell and we stop breathing, and there's a blip. And as long as we stop breathing, this is now etching a little notch in that pattern. And then we breathe again, and then something else happens and a little notch happens. And then something else happens and a little notch happens. This becomes our pranic signature, right? So now, every time that little notch happens, what happens? The whatever wired together in that trauma is stimulated, right? We feel it, and all of a sudden we feel fear, and all of a sudden a story comes, the story amplifies the fear, and we are now reliving the past. Even if we're simply going grocery shopping, even if we're simply at a gathering, or we're in a meeting at work, or we're, I don't know, having to speak in public, whatever it is, all of a sudden, all these things from the past are now coming into our present because they are stored in our pranic body. It's funny, even talking about it, it's like my breath is shortening, right? So this is why there's a lot of different reasons, say, to meditate. Sometimes we're meditating because we truly want to access a higher state of being or something like that. Sometimes we meditate because we want to cultivate a very quiet center, right? Which we're also going to talk about today. But a lot of breathing, especially if we struggle with social anxiety, PTSD, anything like this, is healing these little notches in our pranic body, right? Because these are valuable things that happened in the past that kept us safe, right? Not breathing also allows us not to feel in the moment, right? It's kind of like, let's say you're really upset, or you're really sad, or you're really grieving, or you're trying to hold it together. Like, even think of that, holding it together. Like, it's almost like not breathing, right? If I just don't breathe, I won't feel, right? So now imagine a good friend comes over and they're like, "No, really, how are you?" And you're like, "I'm fine. Just don't push it. Don't push it." And your friend is like, "All right, but you can talk to me, right?" And bit by bit, something starts to relax. And all of a sudden you feel safe enough to relax. And what do? You take a deep breath in, and it all comes gushing out, right? Like, breathing animates our emotions. It allows us to feel. It brings it brings healing into those scary moments, right? So this is one of the most beautiful healing techniques in meditation, and it's whatever works for you. Whether it's a Zen meditation, whether it's a pranic pranayama, right? And I can share a pranayama here that I've taught many times on Insight Timer, and it's on my YouTube channel. It's called Meditation for Anxiety, which you can use to help clear these little notches. But there's many, many pranayamas. But the key is, again, real kindness for self, right? Real kindness during that meditation. Because what's going to happen? You're sitting there and you start to breathe. And as soon as you start to breathe deeply, you're going to hit a notch, right? It's almost like if we can stay breathing shallowly, we don't hit the notches, right? We can just kind of, keep ourselves active elsewhere, and I'm not going to feel those notches. I'm not going to revisit them. But now all of a sudden we're told to sit quietly, we're told to breathe, and all of a sudden we go into those notches, right? And then what happens? We get triggered, and then our mind starts to go, and then we start to have all these crappy emotions rise. This is where our awareness comes in to say, she said this would happen. This is normal. It's okay. We just breathe deeper and we stay with it. This is why in a lot of meditation techniques they'll say, thoughts may come in, but just let them float through. Don't engage with them. They're allowed to come in, but we're going to practice letting them float by, right? This is a huge deal. This is us, and we're not going to clear every notch the first time we meditate or every time we meditate. We might just simply allow that notch to open. That's all. And we kind of look at it and go, I see you. I honor the trauma I've experienced. I honor what I have survived. I'm not going to just push you away anymore because it matters and it's real. This is huge compassion for self, right? We are told to ignore it. We're told to rise above it. We're told to understand our abuser or whatever. In this moment, with our eyes closed, meditating, we are going to honor the truth and go, whoa, hitting a notch here. Okay, I'm going to breathe deeper. I'm going to breathe deeper. Okay, I'm clear. Right? And like, whoa, hit another notch, right? And breathe deeper and breathe deeper. We are given pranayama to help heal our nervous system, right? To heal the trigger responses that were programmed into us from our past. And it's not simple and it's not quick. It's none of those things. But it's almost like once we create this ability, right, to just, it's almost like having the compassion for ourselves and for what we've gone through. Because it's real, right, what we've gone through. And it's really important to honor that. So when we take our meditation time and say, you know what, this is my healing time, and it's going to take some time, but I'm all in. And I'm going to set a timer for 5 minutes. And I'm going to sit and I'm going to breathe. I'm going to let this happen. And it's all good. And even if I hate it, and even if I'm sad, and even if I get triggered, I'm going to sit for this 5 minutes because I really want to heal this. Right? Meditation is one of the most beautiful places to do this because we do it in our own time, honoring our own self, honoring stuff we can't even tell a counselor because we don't even know it. Maybe it's past life. Maybe it's almost like, sometimes the greatest traumas that really affect us are so subtle, right? It's like a pause. It's like you see this a lot in sexual trauma, right? Because again, all of this certainly blends into our vulnerability and intimacy, right? But there's a lot of like performance anxiety, which is in women, but it shows up in men because, they actually have a penis that has to perform. Women, can fake it or do other things, but it really shows up there. And why? Because we have this vulnerable state that we have with another human. And if that other person says the tiniest thing, or pauses, or has a certain look, that can go in, and it's almost like you consciously don't allow it in, but it gets in. And then all of a sudden, it's affecting our entire being. It's affecting our hormonal response, our emotional response, our mental body, everything. And then it shows up sexually, right? But it's very often very unconscious. And the same thing happens in life. I may be able to say to you, oh, well, it was this and this and this that happened. And all I can do is kind of recount the big traumas in my life. But there might have been a million other little subtle ones And they're affecting me all the same. So this is why when we practice this in a meditation practice, whatever it is, it heals all of it. It heals all the things we're conscious of and the things we're unconscious of. And that's really, really powerful, because we don't need to revisit it all. We don't need to talk about it endlessly. If we've never shared it with another person, it's really valuable to have someone witness it, to kind of let us know that it's real and we're not crazy and we didn't make it up. So it's valuable to tell the story once. But if we find ourselves telling this story for the 30th time, right, it isn't the light we need here, because we've already put light into it. Now we just need to heal the pranic body. So this is one of the great challenges in social anxiety. Because if we come back to let's forget about that for a moment, because we're going to bring them back together. So let's imagine that doesn't exist. Imagine we've got sort of a clear pranic body, right? And we go out into the world. It's so funny. My breathing is so wonky, even just talking about it. Like maybe I'm like feeling everybody. I don't know. So imagine we have this clear pranic body, and we go out into the world. It's really important to note that the world's nuts, right? Like we're not living in a utopia. There's a lot of crazy out there. There's a lot of sadness and anger and frustration and dysfunction and all kinds of stuff. Like, and I'm not saying let's focus on it and like be really sad. I'm just saying to be really honest about what's going on out there, right? Like, because we're designed to be empaths. And if we walk out into the world desiring just butterflies and unicorns in the emotional field, we're going to go crazy. That's not reality, right? We're way better off to know that there's a lot of people struggling. That's the reality. And in the land of previous trauma, there are also people who aren't very nice and who are acting very unconsciously and might hurt you. And again, not about focusing it or law of attention or attraction and all that, just an awareness. Because one of the challenges when we have anxiety is that it's like we're told that we're supposed to just focus on the positive, focus on the light, just be loving. But it's like deep down in your heart, you're like, yeah, but that hasn't been my experience. People have actually been really mean to me. You know, people have been raised in brutal abuse and had horrible relationships and all these things. And as soon as we say to someone, just focus on the light, focus on love, people are good, all that, well, that goes against a person's experience. Now you've put a split inside of them. It's like, so the reality I experienced isn't real, but the reality you want me to see is supposed to be what like now you've created a divide inside. So the important thing here is to expand our big picture to include all of it, right? To say, you know what? In all of the people in the world, there are some very loving, safe, wonderful people. There are also some people who are really struggling. There are also some people who are really mean. There are also some people who are completely neutral. There are all, to allow for the whole menagerie, to allow for the whole weaving of humanity. And it's okay. It's kind of like we have it all within ourselves too, right? We have days when we're completely unconscious and crazy, and other days when we're super bright and shiny, and it's all part of the human experience. So now when we go out into the world as a naturally born empath, anything's possible. Maybe the world's bright and shiny today. Maybe, it's a new moon and everyone's responding to that by being very quiet. Maybe it's a full moon and everyone's, wow, Okay. A friend of mine who's a holistic practitioner, her sense of, you know how they talk about how during a full moon, people are more heightened and crazy, or people who work in hospitals, they'll say that, in the psychiatric wards, people are just a lot more agitated. Her theory was, or her sense of it was that, because she would work with people, whether they had parasite infections or bacterial or viral infections, to kind of work holistically with the body. And her sense was that when people have parasites, which a lot of people do, like parasites cause a lot of issues, it's actually the parasites that become more active during a full moon, which literally kind of start like biting or like becoming more active. And so that's actually literally like your skin's crawling. That's disgusting. But imagine that as an empath or as someone with social anxiety, or even imagine calling it social sensitivity, right? And you're around people who are literally just more agitated because it's a full moon. It's valuable to be aware of this, right? We don't have to focus on it and become, even more terrified. But it's important to know, because then, I don't know, it's easier to navigate a terrain when you can see it, right? If I want to climb a mountain and I look at it with my eyes and I go, aha, okay, so there's some water there and there's some rocks there and there's a cliff. Okay, so, we can navigate it because we're seeing it. If I look at that mountain and say, no, I only want to see flat terrain because that's going to be the easiest thing and that's what I want to experience today, climbing the mountain's going to be hard. So it's really valuable to kind of look at reality as a whole. So it's interesting, right? When you take these two sides and you take sort of that trauma response of the pranic body, where we easily can start to believe that everyone in the world is our abuser, right? We become hyper-focused on everyone out there is going to hurt me, right? Then we have this empathic response where we're kind of hoping that everyone out there is all bright and shiny, and then if we encounter someone who's sort of dark or stressed out or anxious or fearful, we freak out. We have these two ends of the spectrum. Like, it's not a lot of wonder that we struggle, right? And realize lots of people struggle. Like, it's not even, some people, we even look at the massive pharmaceutical industry and how many people take antidepressants, right? It's really a widespread thing. And again, it's important to just sort of understand that we're not alone. Because sometimes when we struggle with social anxiety, we think that, oh, well, I must be weak, or I'm different, or I'm strange, or I'm whatever. And it's like, no, we're just human, right? This is like a human experience, right? So what's the answer, right? What's the answer? We can meditate to help smooth out those notches, to kind of try to clear that. Empathically, we can really be aware of our start point, right? We get up in the morning and we kind of do a body scan, or however you want to do it, and you sit there and you go, how am I today? I'm pretty good inside. Then we walk out into the world, and if we all of a sudden are feeling nervous, we can ask ourselves the question, is this mine? Yes or no? And you have to trust our intuition here, right? No. That's all we need to know. You can go on and you can say, whose is it? And do I need to help? And all that kind of thing. But from a social anxiety space, all we have to know is it mine? No. Then I don't have to feel it. And we have this ability. Not mine. Back to self, right? Then we take a few more steps into our life, and all of a sudden we're all angry about something. And you ask yourself, is this mine? Yes or no? 9 times out of 10, everything we're experiencing all day, it's not even ours, right? But because we've had difficulty in the past, we assume it's ours because we have had trauma responses, right? We're interpreting them as ours because they feel familiar, right? They feel like fear we've felt in the past, so we assume it's ours. And a lot of time when we've had trauma, when we've had struggles in our life, sometimes there's shame in there, or guilt, or fear. And then it becomes very hard to discern mine and others, right? So we often talk in meditation about cultivating a witness mind, this quiet center inside. Sometimes we look at our heart center, right? This point right here. And we say, because it's still, right? If you actually just sort of tune into that, it's kind of like the whole world is whirling around. But when I tune into this, it's still. And this is like, in Sanskrit, it's called anahat, unstruck chord. This doesn't get filled with stuff. We can always return to this quiet center, right? From that center, this is also source, God, consciousness, however we understand that. So if you imagine yourself always walking with this beautiful center inside, and then you actually see the world around us, right? We see the people, we see the weather, we see the puppy dogs, we see the sunshine, we see everything all around us, but we are centered right here in Anahat. This is the other big piece that we practice in meditation, is strengthening this, strengthening that witness mind, that ability. This is in every single one of us. This is not a yogi adept thing. This is in every one of us right now. Maybe it's only this big, but then we just expand it a little bit every day, right? And that can be doing anything too. It doesn't have to be meditation. It can be being in nature. It can be sitting by water. It can be lying on the grass, staring up at a blue sky. It can be walking in the rain. It can be anything that brings you back to center. And as we expand that center and we get more comfortable in it, anytime we're upset, whether it's due to feeling the external world coming in or our internal wiring, those notches in our pranic body, we have this witness mind that we can kind of go, hey, what's going on here? Why am I responding like this? Right? We have the ability to observe ourselves. And we have the it's almost like, or we looking around and we go, why is my heart pounding? What's going on here? Right? It's the self observing the heart pounding. It's the self observing myself going into a panic attack. It's myself observing my skin sweating because somebody just walked by and they reminded me of someone, right? It's me observing self. Think about that, right? We have this beautiful center. This is the key, right? I have this real interest right now. One of the things I'm studying personally is brainwave function. Because I've never quite understood the whole gamma, delta, beta, theta brainwave. And one of the things that's always confused me is they talk about, let's say that, it doesn't matter. I don't get caught up in the words because the words are strange, but let's say alpha is us right now. We're just talking, we're, doing this thing, right? Beta is maybe us elevated, a bit more. we're thinking a lot, we're excited or whatever, right? So alpha, beta, right? Let's just say. So then from here, from alpha, if we meditate, we relax our body completely but our mind is still present. This is theta. They talk about theta healing, right? So now we sit in meditation and we are in the theta healing phase. Our body is still, but we are still here, right? And when you think of that, when you think of this trauma response, right? That's what we're doing. We're actually bringing our body into a theta state. We're allowing our body to rest. We're healing our pranic body, but our mind is still here, right? If you skip that, we fall asleep, right? Delta is our body is asleep, but our mind is asleep. But what was confusing to me always about this whole brain, because you can feel that, right? Okay, heightened, normal, calm, asleep. This is a normal measurement, right? We can understand that in brain waves. But then there's the experience of gamma. And the weird thing that I never understood was that gamma was actually a higher frequency than beta. And yet gamma is associated with higher consciousness. The Buddhist meditation, things like that, that when you really access this, Joe Dispenza calls it super consciousness, I think. And what's really interesting to me is my experience of gamma state, gamma brainwave state, is having this deep calm, but a real heightened awareness. But it doesn't fit. It doesn't fit on this little thing. But my sense of it right now, and we'll tell you better later, because I'll probably end up doing a pile of talks on here about this as I explore this deeper. But my sense of it is that gamma is going in another dimension. Because if you take the calm of theta and the activity of alpha and beta, and you merge them together, I think they bring us into gamma. You know what I mean? So imagine that, having a calm state, but fully active, right? This is you maybe creating art in the flow, in the zone. This is running in the zone. This is writing a book in the zone. You're in this beautiful calm theta, and yet fully active. It's not in this dimension, it's in multiple dimensions, right? Which is, human beings are designed to be multidimensional. So now let's apply that to our struggle with social anxiety. Imagine expanding our belief that we can be both in a heightened state of fear, anxiety, stress, awareness of our environment, whatever, and we can be calm, right? And this is really important because a lot of us, I think, have been trained that we are either in this meditative, quiet theta state, or we are in this heightened state in either thinking or frightened or whatever. So now imagine you're walking through that grocery store and there's these people everywhere and you're kind of freaking out or whatever, or you're uncomfortable. What if you can be uncomfortable and conscious at the same time? Right? You don't have to push away the discomfort. You don't have to push away. And we're not disassociating either. We're not separating ourselves from it. We are all of it. It's like we're having both experiences on different dimensions. In this dimension, I'm kind of freaked out right now. Like, I don't like this. I just want to get out of here. Right? That's truth. And we don't ignore it. But I also have this witness mind that is watching, going, it's interesting. And I'm watching myself too. And I'm connected. It's connected. But what if both is the answer? So then all of a sudden, we meditate. We find this beautiful quiet center. We build this wonderful safe space within our heart that we walk with all the time, right? And we honor the life we've lived and the experiences we've had. And all of that simply heals in its own time. We don't force it. We don't do anything. We honor where we are, and we slowly heal from a place of safety. Right? It's an interesting thing to be able to balance the inner focus of a meditative state, our eyes closed, and the outer focus of being in part of the world, right? To be inner aware and outer aware at the same time. That's really what we're talking about, right? I'm observing self and I'm observing other all at the same time. It's almost like this is the human condition, but we've been taught we're smaller than that or something. That we either have the animalistic fight or flight, or we have the Buddha quiet stillness. I think it's both, to be honest. It's an interesting thing, right? And also, the last thing I'll say, and then I'll look at your questions. When we look at the chakras, when we look at the lower chakras, the first, second, third, the first, security, safety, second, interaction with others, third, sense of self, all that, these can be very reactionary because they're our primal survival senses, right? So what's interesting, if you imagine thinking about this heart center, and you're out in the world, and your heart starts to pound and something's going on, or you're nervous, or you're freaked out, or you just don't want to do it, or you just are like, forget it, I'm just going to stay home, whatever, right? But let's say you've got to go for some reason, right? So you have all this crazy energy down here, like crazy energy flying around, putting your stomach in knots, making you sweat, all this kind of thing. Again, the practice of meditation in a really valuable way is to practice breathing and breathing that energy up the spine, right? And actually feeling it go up past your third chakra into your heart center. Like actually bringing it up through those reactive centers into the heart, right? Just bring them up a little. And from the heart center, something magical happens. It's like it distributes. We're still honoring it, but it's like it's feeding. It's funny, like, I don't always want to talk about sex no matter what, especially, when we're talking about serious things like social anxiety. But it's funny, right? When I teach Tantra, people always think, well, how do you get away from this ejaculatory sex and all that kind of thing? And it's the same answer. We have all this sexual energy down in the genitals, down in this, all this, right? And what do? You breathe it up. You bring that energy up the spine into the heart. And then you know what happens? It goes through the whole system. And you experience like a whole different kind of orgasm. And it's really, that's sort of a pleasurable version, but this is the same. All this excitement, right? It can be interpreted as fear, all these other things, but it's just energy. And that energy comes up, and instead of being stuck in the reactionary spaces of that primal survival response, we bring it up and we feed the heart center, right? We actually animate our life force. We bring energy to the human. It's almost like what if all those experiences are actually able to fuel us as a human, right? Imagine wakening us up, really going, I'm going to be alive. It's a whole different perception. I feel my anxiety in my heart space and ground through the lower body to calm. Is this opposite of what you're saying? No, I would trust your instinct on that, right? Because everyone's wired differently. Like, so for example, one of the important things about even the trauma response is that it's so important to ground in the here and now, right? Because what's happening is we're actually reliving the past. And maybe we're reliving a time when we had no ability to escape, right? We had no choice. And one of the most important things is to actually enter the life today and say, wait a minute. Today, I'm 50 years old. This is where I live. There is nothing to fear. Here's the reality. I am not a 6-year-old child who is trapped. I am not a 23-year-old woman who is trapped. I am free. And that grounding, that energy, that what if it works for you to ground, then it is so important, right? To be here now, right now. And that's that grounding energy. And so, we all know this is a monstrous topic, so it's important to do whatever works for you. While witnessing, how can we also be in touch with emotions and respect the inner voice to act? I think it's an and thing. As long as it's almost like if our intention is to not feel the emotions, then we won't feel the emotions, but then we stop breathing, right? We're shutting out. We kind of do this thing where we distract. But the practice is to stay centered and aware and still feel it, right? It's I remember the first time I ever went to a retreat, and the facilitators said, and it was one of those retreats where we all like chew each other's stuff up, right? Everyone's, we process together as a room. And someone said, if someone starts to cry, don't offer them a tissue, right? Because what we're telling them is to clean yourself up, right? Stop feeling this or whatever. So it's a weird practice in life, if you're ever upset, to actually let yourself cry you can get a tissue if it's gross, but to just stay in the mess, like to stay in the messy, crying, angry state. Like, don't clean yourself up, like stay there and practice being present in it. But you don't stop the emotions. You feel it. You cry. And you're present. It's all the same. But it's weird. Like we've sort of been taught we start to cry, so we clean ourselves up. And we try to stay clean again. And I think maybe emotionally we do that too. So when I say to be present, I don't mean to not be emotional. Full out emotion and full presence. It's an and. They stay connected. But I think we have to practice that sometimes. Throat anxiety, when someone is looking straight into my eyes and wanting me to be vulnerable and talk about what's going on. See, this is where I have a few issues sometimes with the healing world or the spiritual world, and because we have to honor where we are all the time. And if you don't feel safe to speak, then you aren't safe to speak. Like we have to, the challenge with being afraid to be vulnerable is because we've been around people where it wasn't safe to be vulnerable. And then we second guess ourselves and we think, oh, well, I can't even tell anymore. And it's like the key to healing is reconnection with self, reconnection with your truth, reconnection with your instinct that says this is safe and this isn't. So if someone comes up and they say, no, really, trust me, open yourself, be vulnerable, that creeps me out. That just creeps me right out, right? It's like you need to trust you. And if this person is actually safe to share with, you'll share with them. And all of a sudden you'll say to yourself, you'll say to them, okay, I've never told anyone this in my whole life. I can't believe I'm telling you this. Because your psyche will have sensed that this person is safe. But if anyone ever has to say to you, relax, be vulnerable, this is a safe space. If someone has to tell your psyche that, it's not a safe space. Period. Because for some reason, this person wants you to open up beyond your desire. For what? For their own ego, so that they feel like a great healer? What? Not that I have an opinion about that. I just, I'm kidding. I totally have an opinion about that. I find that really, that is one of the greatest challenges, because you're treating this person like their instinct doesn't matter. If you don't feel like being vulnerable with someone, you trust it 100%. That's how we connect. That's how we heal. We have to bring ourselves back to self, right? Can we release deep trauma with breathing meditation? Again, deep trauma is something that to speak here, I wouldn't be able to go deep enough. If you look into the work of Peter Levine and people like that, there's many aspects, there's many facets to trauma. And for example, sometimes the challenge of trauma is that we've stored the fight or flight, right? That we, normally if we have trauma, we would run or we would freak out or we would do this thing. And instead, for whatever reason, we've frozen instead. And all of this nervous energy has been stored inside. And so, in some instances, it's important to literally shake and scream and jump up and down and to be very, very, very active to release that trauma response that got locked in the body. Like even sometimes, it's been a long time since I read his book. What's it called? Waking the Tiger or something? But he was saying something about even people can have a car accident and their body needs to go into trauma and it starts to shake. And the initial response and the kind response of the paramedics is, well, let's quell the body with medication, like let's calm the body. But then what's happened is this nervousness has been stored in the body, and then that continues through the body, and it creates huge anxiety disorders. And so sometimes there's treatments where you literally scream and yell and release, right? Or so it's really specific to wherever you are in your trauma. Like maybe it's screaming that is needed. Maybe it's an hour of dancing every day. I teach Kundalini yoga, and in a lot of the kriyas for depression, which is often stored trauma response, you lay on your back and you shake your arms and legs like you just shake for like 5 minutes, which is very annoying and very healing, right? So it's so specific what each one of us needs. And I think this is what's so important about that witness mind. Because when we have that center, we can hear what we need. Maybe we need meditation to smooth out the notches. Maybe we need to be aware of our empathic gifts. Maybe we need to go running until it's all out of our system. Maybe we need to put angry music on and dance like crazy for 2 hours. But we have to be able to hear our guidance. Maybe we need to go and find a counselor to talk to, right? But we have to have that command post inside of us to hear that guidance. So, these are all very, very important topics that each deserve long and deep, interesting study. But in the end, it's really just honoring wherever we are, right? Do I offer one-on-one coaching? Yes, I do. If you go to my website, it's all there. How do I feel about EFT? Is it evasive or healing? I would, again, I would just, to me, it's all about, the proof is in the pudding, right? If you do EFT and it works for you, and you genuinely see the difference in your life, it doesn't matter. You can do all the techniques in the world, but if it doesn't change how you feel at that next social gathering, if it doesn't change how you feel the next time you go shopping, then it's not working. Right? EFT, I know lots of people who love EFT, love all kinds of things, but it isn't for everybody, right? Even, for example, I do these energy grid readings that are similar to an astrology chart, but completely different. And one of the interesting things about it is understanding that some people heal from an energetic space and some people heal from a physical space. So you could have cancer, and if you're someone who heals from a physical state, you could simply change your diet, develop a new exercise regime, have a tumor removed, do all these things, and you will heal. But if your healing comes from an energetic state, then it's actually a philosophy that you have to shift. It's something going on in your energetic body that is manifesting as illness. And everyone's not the same. Everyone's different. And it's the same as trauma. For one person, maybe they're very physically wired, and the best thing they could do is become physically stronger and do push-ups and find their strength by developing their core strength physically. Or maybe they need to not eat as much sugar, which doesn't feed the brain, which calms the nervous system down, and all of a sudden they can find peace. And they're very sensitive to caffeine or something. Whereas if they're an energetic healer, I don't mean that like that. I mean, if they heal energetically, then what they really need to do is meditate, and from there they'll heal. The answer is always what's right for you. And everybody's different, just like how we talked about how some people feel trauma in the throat, some people feel it in the heart, some people feel it in their stomach, right? Some people, everybody's different. So how do we move the energy around? How do we shift it? How do we blend it into the whole so that it's not overwhelming? That's really the key. Right? So wherever you feel it, some people might get migraine headaches, right? Everybody needs to do it so that they simply are utilizing all of who they are. And this is a really big deal too. When you look at yourself as a holistic being, right? You are this great I am in the center. You are someone who loves this. You are someone who has these people in your life. You have a history that might have been damaging. You might have a history that might have been very nourishing. You love this. You have hopes and dreams. You philosophically see the world this way. This is the holistic version of who you are. Even connecting into that can help us with trauma, because then suddenly the trauma becomes one thread in this holistic aspect of who you are, right? This is really important, to put our past into context of our whole being. And again, what's the center? I am. Self, in a really healthy and healed and compassionate way. So thank you so much for being here today. Thank you so much for your donations. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your support of each other. It's so, so lovely. And I look forward to seeing you again. And I will see you soon.